Hey there, ornithusiasts! Welcome to Caterwauling with Kristen, a show about birds and the sounds they make. If you're a feather fan like me and you enjoy the show, please subscribe, share, and consider becoming a patron on my Patreon page. Now let's fly into today's episode. We're going to learn all about the belted kingfisher and talk to my friend Cindy Rutledge about her work banding birds for research, things you can do at home to be a good human neighbor to our bird friends, and more. The belted kingfisher is a stocky, big-headed, blue-gray bird with a white collar. The females have a rusty orange band across their chest and sides. This is one of the few sexually dimorphic birds in which the female is the more colorful sex. Sexually dimorphic means the males and the females are different colors, or they look different. There are several theories on why this may occur, but there hasn't been enough research at this point to give a definitive answer. Still, the theories are pretty interesting, so I'll share them. One theory is that the males tend to stay on their territory year round more than the females do. And they're very territorial birds. So by the time the females are coming back from migration, the males have already been fiercely defending their territories. And the flash of orange on the female's chest can let the males know that they shouldn't attack this bird. The other theory is that the females are also aggressive and territorial and so have higher levels of testosterone. And this can cause pigmentation in the feathers. I also kind of like the idea that the females just understand that a little pop of orange against the contrast of blue is just frankly a great fashion decision. Belted kingfishers live along streams, creeks, rivers, lakes, ponds, where they feed primarily on fish and crawfish. The kingfisher is monogamous in a season, but they will choose different mates year to year. Their nests are inside tunnels and burrows that they build with their beaks in the earthen banks at the water's edge. The tunnels slope slightly upwards so that rainwater or a flood doesn't gather in the nest. It takes them sometimes 3 weeks to build these nests, but generally it's between 3 and 7 days. Still, they do it all with their beaks, and they can be 3 to 8 feet long. The nestlings have acidic stomach chemistry in their little bellies, which allows them to digest the hard bones and shells of their diet. But the chemistry changes as they get older, and they'll regurgitate pellets of these bones and shells that you can dissect if you want to. I know you can't wear gloves, but if you could wear gloves and see what they eat. Cindy, welcome to Caterwauling with Kristen. Thank you
Thank
for,
you for
for
having
coming.
me.
My pleasure. So everyone, Cindy is the CEO of the Southeastern Avian Research uh, nonprofit and also the president of the Nashville chapter of the Tennessee Ornithological Society and secretary of the Tennessee Ornithological Society. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wow, you're a busy woman.
I am. I am. And it's all volunteer too.
That's
So,
amazing. Wow, thank you for your work. And the birds behind you, who are they?
oh, the birds, those are my working birds.
Okay.
They actually people aren't going to like to hear this, but they actually work as bait for loggerhead shrikes, which
Oh,
is another project. They do not get hurt. They sit in a little cage inside a cage, and it's
okay.
their singing and their activity that brings the shrikes down
Oh,
to go into my cage because they're curious. And then the research is actually done on the loggerhead shrike.
wow. So they're kind of like divers in cages going to see great white sharks.
Yeah.
And you specifically protect and help birds by banding. That's kind of one of your specialties, isn't it?
Right. That's a form of research.
Okay.
It's just one part of taking a bird from the wild, capturing it and putting a numbered band on it that's unique to that bird. And then it becomes an individual. You can get specific information about specific birds.
And how do you track research with migratory birds? I imagine it's a little more difficult when you're banding them, and how do they
Right.
come back up again?
Well, they have to come back and you have to recapture them. Right now, there's so many different technologies that you can use, which are extremely helpful, from something called a MODIS tag, which you have to erect a tower and you put a tag on a bird. It's kind of like a little backpack on the bird. But the bird has to fly by one of these towers. So
Wow.
the idea is the more towers we erect, the more the birds will fly by, and then you'll get some indication of, their route, or how
Mhm.
many of them there are, so on and so forth. Then there's, GPS, and you get up to the bigger birds like the cranes, the whooping cranes, where they have tracking devices on them, where at any moment you could get on your computer and see exactly where that bird is.
Wow. 'Cause
So,
I guess they're able to be a little bigger,
oh
probably.
yeah, because anything you put on a bird has to be less than 3% of the average weight of that bird. So I banned hummingbirds. They weigh 3 grams. So anything I put on them has to be 3% of 3 grams. You do the
Wow.
math. It's like crazy.
That
But
must
I'm
be the
thinking forward.
tiniest little band.
It is. It is. It's teeny tiny. They're getting smaller and smaller. We can put some tags on warblers and they only weigh 7 and 8 grams.
Wow.
So it's getting there. I always challenge kids when I talk to them. I say, listen, grow up real quick and develop a battery, because it's the battery.
Oh,
Develop
interesting.
a battery that will last, to
Mhm.
tell me where these, so I can put it on a hummingbird and I can follow it from my house down to the Yucatan Peninsula and know exactly how it's going, how long it took, all those
Mhm.
questions that we can guess at, based on banding, because
Right.
people catch them along the way,
Okay.
and they come back to us. But I just think when we can do that, what we think we know is going to be blown clear out of the water.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Because,
sure. There's
yeah.
still so much mystery.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing.
Migration is the biggest mystery. It is really an invisible phenomenon that takes place mostly at night, and we just don't know enough about it.
Are you banding the strikes?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
have a project with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency looking at why the shrike population in Tennessee has dropped 70% since the 70s.
Wow. Have you found anything conclusive yet?
Well, the biggest thing is habitat, loss of habitat. Shrikes
Mhm.
need expansive grassland territories. And, when the dairy farms are no longer and the land gets divided, there's just not enough space for them. So they move
Right.
on.
What do you think is one of the number one things kind of the common person can do to um, help share their land with birds or make it more inviting?
You always want to think about 4 things: food, water, cover, and a place to raise young.
Mhm.
So those are the 4 things that any bird or amphibian or whatever reptile need to survive. So you want to provide, food, and not just in the form of bird seed.
Mhm.
You want to think about the plants. Okay, this gets berries that birds like, but don't plant this, because if I plant that, the berries are poisonous, or
Mhm.
whatever. So you want to do your research as far as that goes. And then again, if you plant bushes or tree, that's the cover.
Mhm.
We have all kinds of brush piles in the woods, which is cover for sparrows. And it may not look neat and tidy, but big deal.
They love it.
They love it.
Mhm.
And water is essential. So I have a couple of different water features in the yard, but that can be a simple bird bath,
Mhm.
just keep it clean. And just, think about, would I want to live here? Don't use pesticides, because a lot of birds eat insects. And if you're devoid of insects, the birds aren't going to be in your yard. They're going to go somewhere else.
Mhm.
I mean, that includes hummingbirds. 80% of a hummingbird's diet are insects, soft-bodied insects. And so you could hang 1,400 feeders in your yard, and yeah, the hummingbirds will stop by, but they're not going to stay there,
Mhm.
because you're not providing everything they need.
I was listening to you speak about, hummingbird feeders, bird feeders. how birds don't really need that. It's sort of for our pleasure to
It
see them
is.
stop by. And there's actually some dangers to not keeping those up for
Correct.
birds.
Currently, there's the avian flu outbreak, and you should be cleaning your feeders once a month, no matter what. Your
Mhm.
seed feeders, you should empty them out and bleach them. So, maintenance is important. Like you said, I tell people that all the time. We feed birds for our pleasure
Mhm.
and our pleasure alone.
Right.
And unless we're having the exception to that is when we have an event here in Tennessee, like one of those freezes where we get snow and then ice, and it's, we're 5 days below, in the teens, and
Mhm.
then the food's all covered up. Then it's a different story. Then you
Right.
are providing for them and you are likely to save a few lives by feeding them.
I've heard there's some UV decals that you can put on windows that we don't necessarily see, but the birds can, and might help them recognize that it's a space that isn't clear to fly through. Do you know if those work?
NTOS, the national chapter of TOS, just completed a project with Metro Parks at Shelby Bottoms Nature Center. And
Oh,
we turned the Nature Center into a showcase of DIY and professionally installed window treatments to prevent bird strikes.
that's
And
amazing.
so it went from because they were encountering bird strikes over there, and
Mhm.
it's gone from 7 or 8 birds a season to 0. They have no
Wow.
bird strikes now that all these treatments are on their windows. So people can go over there when the center's open, and just see the different treatments from simple tempera paint on your windows, and it's all about the spacing too. You just can't put one here and one, 2 feet
Right.
away if you have a giant picture window, because it's all about this spacing
Mhm.
and different things you can put on your windows. And so, and then a simple thing too, is screens. If you have screens on your windows,
They can
I
see that.
do, and I do get an occasional bird. I'll hear a thump, but
Mhm.
they bounce off the screen
Okay.
and
So,
usually, don't then just fly on their merry way.
of course, have to ask, do you have a favorite bird?
Well, I would have to say I have 2 favorite birds, and they're
Okay.
at both ends of the spectrum. Hummingbirds by far are
Mhm.
the whole family of hummingbirds. There are about 340 of them. They're incredibly fascinating, and it's pretty much my main study. And then on the other end of the spectrum are cranes, um, sandhill cranes and whooping cranes, which just are the most fascinating creatures. And they are actually what brought me to birding.
Okay.
So that's why I have to always mention them, because I saw sandhill cranes coming into roost at a sunset at Wheeler Wildlife.
Gosh.
And as they just drifted in like parachutes, I just was hooked.
Yeah.
And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And so, that's where it sort of all started, working for crane conservation, and the idea that, so many different nationalities and countries relish and cherish the crane as a reverent species. And yet here
Mhm.
in Tennessee in the United States, we shoot them.
Right.
So, we worked long and hard to try to, change people's minds about that, but it didn't work. And so you just have to sort of let it go and just
Yeah.
educate the kids about them.
Are they
And
being shot?
it's a sport. Uh-huh.
Wow.
They're on the huntable list. Yep.
That's
Yeah,
disturbing.
not whooping cranes now. Whooping cranes are an endangered
They're
species. There's
protected.
only a little over 100 of them here in the East. So
Mhm.
they are protected, but the sandhill cranes,
Wow.
they are a huntable species. We tried,
That's
it just
that's
didn't work.
there's nothing that brings me more joy than hearing sandhill cranes approaching in the sky and then trying to search to find them,
Yeah,
miles up.
exactly. I know. They're insane. I mean,
Yeah.
if you ever go to Wisconsin, go to Baraboo, Wisconsin,
Okay.
and go to the International Crane Foundation. I did a lot of volunteer work for them as an ambassador. And it's all 13 species of cranes are there on display.
Oh, wow.
And it is an incredible, they do incredible work around the world. It's a wonderful institution. And I encourage you to go check them
That's
out.
wonderful.
Yeah.
What's and maybe it is the Sandhill Crane story, but what's the craziest or most magical experience you've had with birds?
Well,
Or one
I'll
of them.
circle back to hummingbirds again. I'll tell you the most exciting happened during the pandemic in 2020. And it happened right here in Clarksville, 3 miles from my house. It was July. I had a really long day out banding hummingbirds. And I was sitting, just relaxing, watching TV. And I got a text message from a friend, a fellow Audubon friend. And she said, have you seen the Facebook page? Somebody posted a picture of a hummingbird that's not a ruby throat. And I just was like, oh, because I get those calls all the time. I have this strange bird, and it turns out it's always a ruby throat. And in the middle of July, you don't expect anything but a ruby throat. Mm-hmm. And so I got up and I had to go and boot the computer on, and I had to go look at the picture. And I looked at the picture and I screamed, and my husband came running. He thought, what is the matter? And it was a Mexican violet ear, which is a bird that obviously you find in Mexico and Central America. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so I reached out to the lady and made arrangements to go the next day, even amid COVID and everything, you know, where I'll wear my mask, I won't come inside. You know, this is once in a lifetime thing. And I got over there the next morning and was able to capture the bird and put a band on that bird.
Wow.
Share the species and the story with the homeowner and the little 2-year-old who kept saying, look at the hummingbird. And then when I let it go, he'd go, where did it go? Where did it go?
I have goosebumps.
I know. And it was a series of serendipitous events, because had she not known, because she was from Louisiana and she knew this was weird. She had, and she had a feeder out. And so she knew, and had she not reached out to Audubon, the local group, had Debbie not called me, because she happened to be on the internet, it was one of those things. Somebody happened to do this, that happened to do this, that happened to do that, which resulted in me and, well, Steve went with me, that's my husband, being able to band this bird. And it turns out it was the second record for Tennessee, second or third for Tennessee ever.
Wow.
And it was only like the third or fourth, I can't remember now, but low number ever banded in the United States.
Oh my gosh. And you did that.
It was, and it didn't stick around. By 10 a.m. that morning, it was gone, never to be seen again. Who knows where it went, it was an adult male. It was a beautiful blue bird, blue and green bird. Look it up. It's Mexican violet ear. And so that was truly exciting. I had a lot of mad birders at me because they didn't get a chance to see it. I mean, yeah, if you look it up, it's a bigger bird, so we had to figure out what size band it would wear. And I had to make the band. And it was like, oh my gosh, I was making bands at 1 o'clock in the morning, and consulting with people, other banders out West who may have been around when somebody banded one,
Wow.
It was pretty exciting. So that was the most exciting thing. The most wondrous thing, I guess, was the first time that I banded a ruby throat, and then everybody all left, and then I was back the next year, and I was sitting banding again in the same yard, and I caught the same bird on the same day within the same hour.
Wow.
And that was, you hear about it, but until you experience it. So that was the one, that sticks out in my mind as the best, or the experience of wonder and awe at this tiny little 3-gram bird, that it left here, flew whatever journey down in the Yucatan, spent the winter, turned around, came back over the Gulf of Mexico, and right back to that same yard here in Tennessee.
Wow. I know we anthropomorphize all other animals, and
Right,
I know people look into their yard and you see a cardinal and you're like, that's my cardinal. That and it's
right.
probably five different cardinals, but
Oh,
but
yeah.
for you to be able to actually see the same bird,
And
twice,
that's
that's
what
amazing.
banding does, because we put a band on that bird. So we
Right.
knew exactly, and I have the field sheets and I could look it up and know exactly when I had that bird in my hand the year before. And
Wow.
and since then I've seen it happen 2, 3, 4, and even 5 years later, same bird,
Mm,
returning to the same spot.
that's so amazing.
Those are the my I guess my big stories of wonder and excitement.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah, and
sharing
they
that.
they revolve around hummingbirds. Yeah.
And I've heard that they have I don't know if this is true or not. I've heard they have the largest memory section of the brain of any bird, at least.
Well,
So,
they have the largest brain, one of the largest brains in the avian world in relation to their size. They do.
hmm,
They remember every patch of flowers, every feeder, and their migratory routes.
wow,
And the cool thing is, we believe, or we're pretty certain that the young inherit that knowledge, because the parents do not teach them anything.
that's
And
amazing.
so the routes that their parents made, they will make, and they will, and then they will return to their birthplace to
Mm,
breed again, or the vicinity of their birthplace.
wow,
I banned
that's so
about
fascinating.
3,000 ruby throats in a season.
How many?
3,000.
Wow,
I've
that's a
banded
lot.
over, I've banded almost 13,000 hummingbirds since I started in 2014.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so many tiny little bands.
And I have to make all those bands.
Wow. You're gonna have to send me a picture of one of
Okay.
them. I would love to
Sure.
see that. Well, thank you so much for meeting and speaking and sharing some of your story. It's been
Thank
really
you.
special.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My name's Wilder, and my favorite bird is the cardinal. And, and I think it sounds like this.
And now my best take at the rattling call of the belted kingfisher. Thanks for joining me today. I've had so much fun learning about belted kingfishers with you, talking to Cindy, hearing from Wilder about his favorite bird, the cardinal, and to be honest, his great imitation of that bird call. Please be sure to subscribe, share the video, and consider becoming a patron so we can learn more about our feathered friends together.